Have you ever heard a voice in your head that says to you, you're not good enough? Or what if I fail? You're not alone, first of all. I want to share with you that this is a common challenge that many women face, me included. And today's guest has literally faced life or death moment with the same voice in her head and learned how to rise above it. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Limor Bergman Gross, and you came to From a Woman to a Leader podcast. This podcast is for women in tech who are ready to grow, lead, and be seen for the brilliant leaders they already are. And this episode today, I'm talking to Jenn Donahue. And Jenn is a retired Navy captain, engineer, and leadership coach. And we talked about overcoming imposter syndrome, facing fear of failure and also success, and rewiring your brain with a warrior mindset. So, for those of you who feel stuck, if you doubt yourself, or holding yourself back from speaking up, this episode is going to help you. Are you ready? Let's dive right in. Hi, Jenn. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Can't complain. Thank you so much for being here today so early in your morning.
I know. It's about 6 a.m. here on the West Coast, so I've already got my coffee, and I am just really excited to be here today.
I'm excited to be with you today as well. And and not every day I have a chance to talk with someone who's been in the Navy. And kudos for that, and big respect, and thank you so much. And I want to hear about your background and how you kind of went to, switch from being in combat, being in war zones to what you do today.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I really started out, being a civilian and had a great time with that. But then I felt like I just had more that I needed to give. And for that reason, I went into the U.S. Navy. I did that for several years on active duty. And then I decided that I found this like really handsome guy. And I quit the active duty Navy and became a reservist because he wound up moving to San Francisco. And so I had to get off active duty to join him. Actually, we've been married for 25 years, so it wasn't just a whim. But during that time, I realized that I still had a lot to give. So I stayed in the reserves all that time. And whenever I retired about 2 years ago, I had 27 years of duty with the Navy.
Yeah.
But what all of that taught me was there are so many compelling lessons about leadership and how to interact with people, especially in war zones and things like that. So what I decided is that, you know what, I still have more to give, and I've decided to become a public speaker. And so I go all over the world and I help organizations, corporations, whatever it is, with their leadership style. I also help them on an individual basis as well, because I really think it's important that we need to be right with ourselves. We need to overcome all the obstacles that we put in our own way, like imposter syndrome, self-doubt, fear of failure, even fear of success. And a lot of
Yeah.
times those limit us for what we can do for others. And so that's what I've really devoted the rest of my life to, is just going around and just helping people.
Wow, this is incredible, Jen. That you are able to do that, and so many women face fears, different fears. How do you go about helping people? Because fear of failure, you mentioned fear of failure, this is something that holds back so many people.
Oh, it really does. I did some research, and the fear of failure, almost 48% of the entire world has said that the fear of failure has stopped them from going after their goal or their dream. And that's just people who admit it. Think of all the people who still are dealing with the fear of failure, and they're just thinking, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I don't know enough. Maybe I should just be quiet. I'd really like to go after that, but I don't know if now's the right time. That fear of failure, what we don't realize is everything that we've already done. And if we start to think about, you know what, I did really well in high school. I did really well in college. Hey, you know what? I actually killed it on a project last week. when we start to think about all of those things that we actually have done, all of those accomplishments, you'd actually be surprised. It start to change like your neural pathways so that you realize, hey, maybe I can do this. But we have to first realize that something is stopping us. And once we realize that, then we can start to work on it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that this is the first step, right? To be more conscious and thoughtful about what is holding us back. And as you said, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that and don't even admit that they're afraid. They're afraid to fail.
They are. A lot of us have a lot of responsibilities. We have responsibilities to ourselves, a lot of times to our family, to our friends, and we feel like we're going to let them down. And what I tell every single person is like, it always has to start with you. And I ask them, think about your thoughts. And I know that that sounds circular and it probably even sounds silly, but that's the first way that we can start to get over this. We have to think about what we're actually telling ourselves. And if we're telling ourselves that we're not good enough, we're not worthy, and all of these other lies, that's usually where the fear of failure starts from.
For sure. Yeah. And we can be our worst critics, right?
Oh, yeah.
Usually we are.
I say that I have two different voices in my head. One is the mean little voice. That's the one that's in the back saying, you're not good enough. You should do something else. Kind of like that, sort of like that mean girl, that was always like picking on you in high school or grade school or
Yeah.
whatever, sort of that mean little voice that's just in the back of your head, telling you all these things. But then I also think that there's also another one, and I call him the sneaky little bastard. And
Mm.
and who that is the one that's sort of like procrastination, but it's a little bit more harmful than that. Instead of just saying, oh, well, I think I'm going to wait on doing this, it's actually telling you to wait because it doesn't ever want you to start. And
Mm.
so let me just give you an example. Like, for instance, let's say, you have a meeting and it's like, oh, should I eat now or should I eat later? And you just decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to just eat later. Okay, that's procrastination. But if you're going for like a big project or something like that and say, I'm going to just wait until later to do that, that's the sneaky little bastard telling you, hey, you know what? Maybe we're just never going to get to that. It's like procrastination, but at the same time, it doesn't ever want you to start. And so these are like these two little voices in my head that are always kind of competing to see who can be the loudest to try to stop me from going after what I think I really deep down in my heart, I think I know I can do.
So how do you handle that? How do you overcome those inner voices?
So I've actually developed a third voice, and I call this my warrior.
Okay.
And so my warrior is the one that actually knows that, yes, I can do this. And so I've actually gone through and you can retrain your brain. So just as we have these other two voices that are kind of running rampant, in your brain, you can actually train a separate voice. And so what I've done is I just started writing down each day, what are my wins for the day? It might be something easy like, you know what, I had the courage to call a client. Or maybe I made a really great dinner last night, or I gave myself just time to work out. And so you start writing down your wins like every day, and it starts to retrain the neurons in the different pathways in your brain to start to look for wins. So the more that you do this, you realize you actually do have more wins than you might even have thought about. And then you start to think about how. How did you accomplish these? And so those are your strengths. And a lot of times that's really hard. For instance, just calling that client where you thought, you know what, I don't know about this, he might just say no. But having the courage to do it, you realize, wait a minute, I did have courage. And so you write that down next to your win. It's like, no, I do have courage. Or maybe you did really well in college and maybe you're tenacious, maybe you're smart. And you start to think about all these things. It's like, hey, wait a minute. You know what? I am smarter than like I really want to give myself credit for. I am more courageous, both internally and externally. I have strength. And so you start to look actually at what you've written and you start to realize, hey, maybe I can do this. And so by going through this exercise sort of over and over again, just like those wins where you start to really realize very quickly, hey, I do have wins, you start to realize, wait, I do have strengths. So when you hear that mean little voice in the back of your head saying, I don't think you're good enough. A lot of times what I do is I go over to the printer, I grab a clean piece of paper, and I just start writing down all of my accolades. And then I start writing down all of my strengths. And I realize, hey, wait a minute, you know what? I can do this. I really can. And so by retraining your brain, you can actually like shut these little voices down pretty quickly.
Wow, that's really incredible. I mean, I do a lot of work, as you mentioned, like writing the accomplishments and all that. But kind of what I'm hearing from you that you have to kind of make it a habit, right? I mean, something that you do on a daily or regular basis.
I think if you do it on a regular basis, it's going to be a lot easier. And especially in those times when you start to hear that voice, it's going to become a lot quicker.
Yeah.
But I think what's also really important for what you just said is that you are writing your accomplishments. Start to think about deeper than that. How did you do it? What are those traits that you personally have that allowed you to do that? And then if when you internalize that, wow, that's super powerful.
For sure. And I think that we talked about fears and fear of failing. I really believe in trying to do things that scares you on a regular basis. What do you think about that?
I think that's the only way that you're going to grow.
Yeah.
And it's scary, but like otherwise you're just sitting in your status quo. I mean, if you
Yeah.
have a really good life, like, okay, then maybe you don't need to stretch or do anything else like that. But, there's always something that we can do. Somehow we can just improve ourselves. This is how we keep young. If we just sit down on our laurels and we're just happy with our status quo, you're not moving forward and you're probably moving backwards a little bit. Just think of like something small that you could do each day to maybe improve yourself.
For sure. Yeah. I just want to share that last week I was in ski vacation with my husband, and like I haven't skied for at least 8 years, and I was actually terrified because I wasn't sure if I'm gonna even be able to do that and if I'm not gonna hurt myself or anything. But I said, "What the hell?" I'm not gonna let the fear stop me. I'm just gonna do it.
Did you have
And
a
I
great
was
time?
able to do it. I mean, I survived.
Well, good. And you probably had fun while you did it.
Yeah, at the beginning, I think I was a little bit anxious, but yeah, after a few slopes, I started to enjoy it again. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So we have a ski hill that's literally 30 minutes from our house, and we try to ski every week. And honestly, what you went through is completely normal. The very first time that I ski every single season, it's like that also. Kind of anxious, and it's like, okay, do my legs remember how to work the way that they're supposed to work? So what you just went through, totally normal. So,
Yeah,
but I'm so glad that you just said, hey, you know what? I'm just going to do it.
yeah, and I think that I guess what I'm trying to say here that you can conquer your fears or kind of face your fears. Doesn't have to be just related to work.
True.
I think this is a muscle to train in every aspect of your life.
I absolutely agree. We talk a lot about fear, but let's also talk a little bit about risk.
Yeah.
And so if we think about risk, what is the likelihood that something is going to happen? And what are the consequences? That's really what risk is. And when we're skiing and we're on bunny slopes and things like that, the likelihood that we're going to really hurt ourselves is pretty low. And the consequences are also pretty low. So that's low risk. And so if we start thinking in terms of risk as opposed to, oh, I might hurt myself, think of the probability, that you're actually going to hurt yourself. And it's probably low. And, the consequences might not be that great because, you might not be, going off ski jumps and things like that. And so if we start
Definitely not.
Me neither. That's not me. But if we start thinking about it in terms of risk, as opposed to just likelihood or consequences, then we might realize, hey, what we plan to do might not actually be that bad. I think about everything that I go out and do in my life. I was like, oh, that actually is pretty scary. But then you start to break it down. I mean, we're all engineers. We all do this type of thing just in our head naturally. Start breaking it down into consequences and likelihood, and you're probably going to find out that, hey, you know what? This actually is a low risk activity. Let's go do it. What's stopping us?
Yeah. And I want to ask something about that. I mean, this is really interesting, Jen, what you mentioned. So a lot of women that I coach, I mean, they may seem to kind of exaggerate on something that they're trying to do that make it in their head, right? I mean, make it much bigger than it actually is. Let's say they want to say something to their manager and they're afraid.
Right.
Maybe they're afraid to say they're going to be delayed in a project, whatever. I mean, and yeah, if you look externally, you'll say, well, what's the risk? I would tell you, well, the risk is probably not big. But for them, it seems like much, much bigger. What what is your advice for them? What can they do?
Well, one of the things I would say, if you can talk to a coach or maybe even
Yeah.
talk to a colleague and run it by them and say, hey, does this sound absolutely crazy? And really know your boss as well. Do they have a track record of flying off the handle? Or are they pretty reasonable? Yeah, if they do fly off the handle all the time, you're probably going to have to go and, do it very gently. But if you have to get outside of yourself and you have to look at, what the circumstances are. And if you have a boss that's reasonable, then again, that consequence is so much lower. I would say practice, maybe talk to a friend, talk to your coach, and just realize that, hey, you know what, this is something that really needs to be done. And then I would say you just have to do it. You have to have courage. And courage is something that's really, really hard. But the more that we practice courage, the easier that it gets. And so, yeah, in our minds, man, sometimes we make things like so big,
Yeah.
so insurmountable. And we think, man, we are never going to get over this. Maybe you also have to just sort of like chunk it down into smaller pieces if that's what needs to be done. And maybe you just have to take one tiny little step, one step that's like so easy that it seems silly not to take it. So maybe if we take something like that and just chunk it down into smaller pieces, maybe that makes it easier. But I really think that you have to get outside of yourself and really think about, am I being reasonable? I mean, that's the biggest thing are all of these fears reasonable? Would a normal person think this is reasonable? And like I said, we have all of these mean little voices and sneaky little bastards running around in our head. But here's the thing. If we talk to a friend or a coach, they can't hear those voices.
Yeah.
So they can't hear what we're thinking on the inside. So if we say, does this sound reasonable? They might have their own little voices in their head, but they can't hear ours. And so what they tell us really is the truth.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, courage is something we talked about fear and you mentioned courage. Like courage is something also that we need to practice, right? I mean, be courageous, and it could be something very small. Again, courage is also relative to what you think
Right.
that courage is, and one person may think it's just something that will look very small to someone else.
Courage comes in all sizes.
Yeah.
It means maybe you stand up for a colleague. Maybe you run into a burning building. I mean, there's all types of courage. Courage can be just something just as easy as talking to somebody. That, for some people who are introverts, okay, like I'm sure a lot of the people that are on your podcast are
Yeah.
also introverts. Courage is hard for us.
Absolutely.
It really is. I mean, most of us just want to go and stand against the wall and like look at everybody else in the party, but courage is one of those things that like makes us get off the wall and go and talk to people. And
Absolutely.
It's a choice. We can, if we just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to just do one small, tiny, courageous act today. That's it. Think about what that might be. Maybe that's, getting off the wall to go talk to somebody.
Yeah, and I think that, so first of all, I'm introverted, so I very much relate to everything you said. And for me, it's like going out of my shell, like getting out there. Like this week, I was in a in-person meeting for business women. Like getting into a room, there were about 40 women. I don't know anyone, almost anyone. It's like, yeah, you have to practice those things that I know that they're uncomfortable, but I have to practice them on a regular basis to train those muscles.
It's really true. And so I would ask you, when you did that, what were the benefits that when you went to go talk to somebody?
I really think that meeting people and building connections is the way to go. And because you never know who you meet. It's not just about the benefit or the gains you're going to get immediately. It's just like you expand your horizon, you meet new people. It's always fun to meet new, interesting people. You can learn from them, you can help them, and you may be able to help each other or collaborate. So there's so many benefits.
Exactly. So just that one tiny piece of courage that you had to go and do that, look at what happened. That's what courage can do for you.
For sure, absolutely. And I may have actually some kind of collaboration just from going once, but I'm going to do that on a regular basis. So it's like I definitely see that. And I also, a lot of women that I coach, I encourage them to go to conferences related to their area of expertise, because conferences are a great way to get out of your shell, get uncomfortable, meeting and talking with people. And if you're even more courageous, apply for speaking and talk.
Yes.
And you said you're talking a lot, right? Tell us about that.
I do. But so as funny as it is, yes, I have no problem getting up and speaking in front of 1,400 people.
Wow.
I actually love it. I'm so excited. And here's what I would tell people who might be afraid to get up and speak in front of people. Again, it's not about you anymore when you're up on stage. It's about the audience. It's about the audience and what you can tell them and what you can help them with. And so whenever you take all of that spotlight off of yourself of, oh, what if I don't say the right thing, or I went off script, or whatever it is, and stop worrying about yourself and start looking at the audience and realizing, like, I am here to help every single person in this room. All of a sudden, that seems to kind of go away. All of that anxiety and I don't, I'm not sure if I can do this. There's always the whole, like, imagine the whole audience naked. Okay, don't do that. That's really uncomfortable. Don't do that. Like, that's such an old adage. Don't do that. But
Yeah.
realize how you can help people. And I'll be completely honest. Like I said, I have no problem going up on stage and speaking in front of 1,400 people. Afterwards, whenever we go to the after parties and things like that, and there's all these people around me that I don't know, once again, that whole introvert thing comes rushing right back in, and it's like, oh man, like, okay, I don't know anybody in this room. I need to put on a smile. so I totally get it. It kind of clicks right back in, and it's like, okay, no, these people want to come and they want to talk to me. And so you have to kind of get out of your own head and just realize people are coming and they want to talk to you, and they want to get to know what you know, and maybe they want to tell you their story. And so, like, get out of your head and just realize that people, they might want to talk to you. And so I think that's really powerful. It's like, if I can just get out of my head, everything seems to kind of fall into place a whole lot better. To be honest, I never thought about being a speaker. A good friend of mine, I think she's one of the most booked speakers in the United States, and we're friends. And she knew I was in the military. She knew I'm an engineer. And she said, hey, have you ever thought about telling your story? And I said, no. It's like, I didn't even think about it. I'm like, no. And she's like, you might want to think about it. You might be able to help a lot of people. And all of a sudden it was like a seed, and it kind of got stuck in my brain. I thought, maybe I could do this. And I started researching how to become a public speaker. Like, I read books. I did all of the things. I started to apply to conferences. A lot of conferences, allow you to go and speak for free. I even went to a master's level course on public speaking, and they really taught you more about stagecraft, about how to properly craft a speech, where to stand, what to do with your hands. The whole thing is like each sentence needs to be impactful for the audience. And so going through this master class, I think is really what set me up to be the speaker that I am today. But it really all just started with a friend saying, have you ever thought about telling your story? And I think that's what's so impactful is that we have an impact on so many people around us. If we start to look at other people and the attributes that they have and think, you know what, this person might be really good at that. Maybe if I just give them a seed, maybe that'll spur them in a different direction.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes it really does take just one person seeing something in us that we didn't see in ourselves yet. Planting that little seed, like your friend did for you, you completely change someone's path. And you're right, we often underestimate how much our own story could impact someone else.
They really do. And these stories need to be heard. I mean, what's great about this is that, by telling your story, there's other people who are probably going to relate to it and be like, oh, I know exactly what that person's going through. I did that too. And then you have the younger generation who are hearing it, and they might have some lessons learned from what you have to say. So you're helping them as well. So realize that your stories are super powerful.
Yes, yes. I always say that sharing your story isn't just about you, it's about who hears it. You never know who's gonna be listening at just the right time and think, wow, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And I think, especially as women, we tend to downplay our experiences or think they're not big enough to share, but they are. Your story could be the permission someone else needs to dream bigger, speak up, or just not feel alone.
Can we talk a little bit about the fear of success? This is something that I've kind of run into over the last couple years. And honestly, I didn't believe that it existed. I mean, it sounded kind of silly, like, "Oh no, I'm successful." That's actually not what it is. Uh, a lot of women have a fear of success, and they don't know it. And so I think this is why it's sort of important to bring up. A lot of us are afraid to go after something because of the consequences of that. I was interviewing a woman a couple months ago, and she was saying she's a meteorologist, and she really wanted to go after a job, but she was afraid of what would happen if she got the job because she would have to talk to her husband about relocating to Seattle. And she was afraid that if she was successful, she was going to have those hard conversations with her spouse. And so if we start, and I've talked to several other women about this as well, is that almost like they're holding themselves back and they don't want to be successful because of the hard conversations that it might create with their family. And so I thought that was really intriguing that actually several women have been holding themselves back. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I've definitely seen that too. And it's such an important point. We talk a lot about fear of failure, but what about fear of success? And that's sneakier and often tied to everything success might bring: change, pressure, tough conversations, or doing something we have never done before. And I see that all the time in my coaching: women who are fully capable but hold themselves back because they worry what saying yes might mean for their life, their relationships, or their balance. And here's what I always tell them: you don't have to leap. Just take one small step at a time, one move that feels bold, but not terrifying. And that's how you build momentum without shutting down. And you don't have to have all the answers. You take one step at a time.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I just thought it was. I think you nailed it. We have to just take things one step at a time, and we don't know what's going to happen. In the end. So have the conversation. Have the conversation about and say how much you're excited about this position and really let your spouse or significant other know, how, and if they're true, they're going to be excited for you. Yeah, it might be hard to relocate, in this certain situation, but we shouldn't fear success. We shouldn't, even if we do get that job, and we're worried about, oh no, like, am I going to be a good leader? Am I going to know what to do? I'm going to have to, work twice as hard to try to figure it out. Okay. Well, figure it out, but, don't limit yourself. And that's what I found all of these women were doing, where they were limiting themselves. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I never even thought about this. So I agree with you absolutely. Just break it down into little chunks, have the conversations, and don't stop yourself from something just because the consequences might look very hard.
Yes. And I think that's such an important reminder that we're not supposed to have all the answers. We're not supposed to have it all figured out before we even start. And I always tell my clients, leadership isn't about knowing everything on day one. It's about being willing to learn, to ask questions, and to grow into the role. Everyone starts somewhere, and if you're feeling nervous or unsure, chances are so did the last person in that role. So don't let that uncertainty stop you, because the truth is most people are figuring this out as they go.
Exactly. Think about all the other people who are going into that position. They probably didn't know what they were doing either. So you're just like them. You're going into a new position. You're going to figure it out. Just say yes. I love that. So powerful.
And Jen, before we end our conversation today, please share with us, how can people find you?
So people can find me easily on LinkedIn. I'm very active there, so you can look me up on LinkedIn. You can go to my website. I love to travel the world. I love to help people. I love to give workshops. I love to give keynotes. Really, whatever you might need. My whole life, I was put on this earth to help people. And so the more that I could do that, I would absolutely love to. I've got a book. It's coming out in November. So if you want to really get into the details of some of the things that we've talked about, the book is going to be available then. But yeah, I want to help as many people as I can. And the best way is just to reach out to me and let's have a conversation.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'm sure, Jen, that your book is going to help so many people figuring out and finding their inner warriors so they can reach their goals, their dreams, whatever they're up to. And I really want to thank you so much for being here with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you so much.
I've had such a wonderful time too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for tuning in to my conversation with Jenn Donahue. And I really hope that you're walking away with a little bit more courage and a lot more clarity about your own leadership journey. And if you enjoyed this episode, I want to invite you to subscribe to From a Woman to a Leader so you never miss another episode. And if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who could use a little extra support today, whether they're facing imposter syndrome, stepping into a new role, or just need a reminder that they are not alone. And before you go, just a sneak peek about the next week episode. So next week, I'm interviewing Ksenia Votinova. And she is a Paris-based serial entrepreneur and initiate business coach who helps executive women in tech launch SaaS businesses without quitting their day jobs. She shares how she went from growing up in the Ural Mountains to co-founding a profitable startup, living as a digital nomad, and now helping other women reclaim their freedom through entrepreneurship. Her story is honest, bold, and incredibly empowering. You definitely don't want to miss it out. So, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.